This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit per second network connections, Intel E5 processors, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your servers on. It deploys Linux in seconds from a Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distribution and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, plumbing, scaling, and everything else you would want. So get the most out of your Linux node by checking them out at linode.com or devchat.tv/linode. Hello, welcome to React Native Radio, episode 79. This is your host, Nader Dabbit. Today on our panel, we have Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey, everybody.
And today our special guest is Vik Advani. Welcome to the show, Vik.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So today our topic is going to be VR and AR with React Native, and we're going to talk about the company that Vik is one of the co-founders of, Viro Media. So that's going to be kind of the general gist of what we're going to be talking about. But before we do get into the topic, Vik, can you give us a quick intro about, I guess, how you got into programming and how you got into the current situation that you're in with Viro Media?
Yeah, sure. So quick intro. I got into programming by being interested in developing games back in high school. So, I started doing game development after college, worked in the game industry with one of my high school friends also worked with me in the game industry. Did that for 2 or 3 years, actually 3 to 4 years, and then developed a lot of console games. Left to basically to start my own company, and we're looking to take video game technology and kind of put it into different industries, and we thought mapping would be a great industry to do that. So I left the game industry with and founded a new company with my brother and 2 of my high school friends, and it was called Up Next. Moved to New York, did that for 5 years, created 3D mobile mapping application. That was acquired by Amazon, ended up in Seattle, stayed at Amazon for 3 years, and we helped build what's known as Amazon Maps today. And then left and, started another company, and we saw that AR, VR was really kind of picking up, and we wanted to do something new, and we want to take our expertise in rendering and 3D technology and kind of get in this space. And then, here I am today at Viro Media.
So can you tell us a little bit about the company and what is it that you're doing? Like, what's maybe the quick elevator pitch to people that are kind of listening?
Yeah, so Viro Media, our motto is to make AR, VR development simple. And that's basically our kind of guiding philosophy. And the primary way we do that right now is we built a cross-platform AR, VR solution on top of React Native. So you get all the benefits that you get with React Native, that fast iteration, that live reloading, with a set of components that make AR and VR development really simple for normal developers, especially JavaScript developers or React developers.
Okay, cool. So does this work cross-platform, or is this like iOS only?
Yeah, so right now for VR, we are cross-platform on Android, iOS, Cardboard, Google Daydream, and Samsung Oculus Gear headsets. For AR, we work for iOS AR with ARKit, and Android AR Core is coming out next month. So it is cross-platform.
Awesome. So is it like a write your code, like one time, run it anywhere, or is it more just like you expose a set of APIs and you have to kind of maybe write the application, specifically for one platform as far as AR is concerned, I guess?
No, so basically it is mostly write for one platform and write anywhere. Because we have our own renderer, that's what enables us to do that. We're not wrapping SceneKit or whatever. We roll our own rendering engine, so you just more or less write once and run anywhere. The only differences are maybe on the controller input. There may be some little flags you check if this is, does this have this button? Does this device have this button or that button? But for the most part, it's write once, run anywhere.
When you say different rendering engine, are you saying replacement to something like 3JS or replacement to like the whole, like it's the same React Native API, but the internals are different?
So we wrote a cross-platform C++ rendering engine that runs on Android and iOS. And that's what makes our API so cohesive. So we're not using, so basically by writing our own rendering engine, we could write our own features close to the hardware and add on to that as our hardware changes really fast. So for instance, instead of having an API that wraps SceneKit and whatever, Android I don't think has anything equivalent to that. But instead of having a set of components that wrap a third-party rendering engine or the platform rendering engine, we have our own that makes it cohesive and easier to use. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. So like with this rendering engine, like what, like the first thing that comes to mind, like for me with all this like AR and VR stuff, is like Snapchat's filters.
Yes.
If I wanted to, like build like Snapchat filters in React Native, like would I use your service?
Yeah. So basically, like the hot dog man that they have right now.
Yeah.
You could do that within like 20 lines of code and have it work cross-platform. So you could have these 3D objects placed in the real world and have it dance or move around or interact with it any way you want.
That's so cool. Side note, did you know that Snapchat makes Halloween costumes now and that you can buy the hot dog man on Amazon?
No way.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool. Too late. I'm already booked for this Halloween. They made for next Halloween.
What are you going to be for Halloween?
I'm going to be Optimus Prime with the mask that like shoots lasers out of the eyeballs. It's really, really awesome.
Oh, nice.
Dude, you should use this and build yourself like a React Native, like Natter, like for your next course. Like imagine Optimus Prime pointing your phone at you and like seeing like the lasers come out of the face or whatever.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about playing around with this because a lot of the companies that we do training for, at least they're interested in how to do VR and AR with React Native. So definitely after this recording, I'm going to spend next week looking at it once I learn a little bit more about it. So
yeah, definitely. If you have any questions, let me know. And we also have an app called Figment, which is built on top of our platform, which kind of shows you the power of what it could do. It's called Figment AR. So you can kind of download that and see the capabilities, at least on the AR feature set.
Oh yeah, totally. So it's Figment. It's in the App Store. Is it also in the Play Store?
It's in the App Store. It's not on the Play Store yet because Google has not released AR Core yet to the public. It's in beta.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But once Google makes AR Core public, then we will release it.
So what other platforms do you run, or is it this is just a React Native like centric company?
So we're working on things, but right now we're mostly React Native centric company. But we plan to make the model of the company is to make development simpler. Where we want to meet developers where they are. Right. I think right now in the AR VR space, as a developer, you have to use a heavyweight game engine to do something like this. And we're trying to remove that from the equation because those are built for games, not applications. And we see ourselves as an application engine. So right now, React Native, I feel is the best solution, the best cross-platform solution, because there's not really much out there yet. I mean, there's things like Flutter, which is kind of still in alpha. But it seems like the best way to reach the most developers, and it's also well supported and has a strong community.
Yeah, totally agree. I was going to ask you why you chose React Native, but I think you just answered my question there. So
yeah.
So I guess when did you start the company, and what has been your experience so far, like working with React Native? I'm just kind of curious, like the technology roadblocks and things that you've run into so far.
Yeah, so we've been with started the company about over 2 years ago. A lot of that was kind of building the core rendering engine from the ground up. So at first, admittedly, we didn't know much about React Native. We're learning as we're developing, but we've since got quite familiar with it. And I think some of the technology challenges were, especially in AR VR, when you need really close access to the native hardware. For instance, you need to be able to react to something 60 frames per second. Doing that through the React Native bridge is sometimes a complication, right? So finding creative ways to go about, giving users a flexible feature set while allowing them to still, while keeping performance up was a challenge. But and sometimes doing things like animations, it's always been kind of an issue with React Native. But I think we came up with our own animation framework that we think enables a lot of flexibility for animating in VR and AR. But a lot of the challenges are just around designing the API correctly, right, and making sure it makes sense. It's not too it's easy to follow. Everything's named correctly, and it also follows React Native conventions.
Wow, so you guys have been working on this for 2 years, and
yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, you have to be so far ahead of I don't know, like if someone were just to kind of start working today on a product. I think it's really interesting to me because I haven't really heard of the company up until maybe a few months ago. So the fact that you've been all kind of working together on this, quietly, in my opinion, or maybe I just haven't seen the company, like it might not be visible to me for some reason. But the fact that you've been working on it for this long and now VR and AR are starting to come as part of the platform, and you're able to kind of use that rendering engine that you've been building all this time. That's really, really interesting. Was that your original business plan, I guess you would say? Is that something that you kind of set out to do? You were like, okay, we know this is going to take a while. We're going to just work on this. And then it's, no matter how long it takes, once we get there, we're ready to release, or did it just kind of happen organically?
So at first we built the VR feature set because those headsets existed and they're out, and the cardboard headsets came out, and the Oculus headsets came out, and the Google Daydream came out, and we're like, this industry is really starting. It's nascent, but starting to take off, and there's clearly a need for something like this. And so we had a goal of supporting those three headsets and then releasing to the public. And then Apple announced ARKit, and then we're like, okay, well, released version 1, and then now we always would saw ourselves an AR VR company. Let's add an AR feature set to our platform and release that. So part of it was like we had a plan, but part of it was kind of, as the industry is new, we kind of react to it in a way as it's changing so fast because it's so new. Like Google and Apple announced ARKit and AR Core kind of suddenly in the past 6 months or so, and new headsets are coming out next year, so new controllers are coming out. So the industry is changing really fast. So we try to stay on top of that, but at the same time, we do plan to a certain amount, like 3 to 6 months out, to kind of guide our releases.
So I'm taking a look at the documentation right now, and it seems like you're virtually supporting everything, right? Are there things that you're not supporting now, but you plan on releasing soon?
So one of the things is like I mentioned before, AR Core for Android. We plan to release that next month. We're adding new components and new features at a regular cadence now. So, for instance, recently we just added physics, lighting, shadows, animations for different 3D models, and we're going to keep adding more rendering features to kind of become at par with the game engines out there, and then keep trying to support different use cases that come up from our users as well. So sometimes people from GitHub come and say like, hey, it'd be cool if I could do this. And we're like, oh, we never thought about that. let's enable that as well. Right.
Have you heard of Expo by any chance? Expo.io?
Yes, yeah. I have heard of Expo. Mm-hmm.
I think both. I almost see like a partnership there where they could, like bake in your API into the Expo product, so everybody, who's using Expo, because I know they just incorporated ARKit. Like this would be like awesome for people who are just getting started in React Native, right? React Native on its own can be kind of a drain sometimes, right? So like simplicity of like building apps and then having this on top of that is like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, it's funny because one of our users brought that up recently too. So maybe we should talk to Expo. I met Charlie once at a meetup in Seattle. I don't think he remembers me, but I think as more of our users, if they ask us for these kind of things, we'll look into that more. We ourselves have our own testbed app, so you could download it, similar to Expo's app. It's like you could just kind of enter your URL, and it works over ngrok, and you could kind of just iterate really quickly using that. But I think as if our users request that, then I think that's a path. We could explore some partnership there. Yeah, because I was going to say what Expo is doing is really cool for the React Native community. So I know they're deeply involved in it. So, we'd love to find some way to work together.
So I guess I have a question. I have two questions, really. So you mentioned that you picked React Native as a platform for multitude of reasons. Do you think that React itself is kind of like an ideal way to write applications in general, and in particular, I guess, AR and VR? And also, do you think that the API that you all have built, it sounds like you spent a lot of time kind of thinking about the API. Have you kind of improved upon maybe the existing like ways to kind of create AR and VR out there? Or is it more of like JavaScript is such a well-known language, you want to like give JavaScript developers the same power that like some of these other native developers have in that same space?
That's an excellent question, actually. So let me answer that in parts. So yes, I think React Native is a great way to build applications. When we were at Amazon, people were exploring it. We were there, and a lot of us came out being like, "Oh wow, this is the way apps should be built. This having a declarative style." It just makes it just makes things so much easier, right? Declarative language like React Native, and in terms of and also the fast iteration, you just can't beat how quickly you can iterate without that compile and load cycle that you go through with the traditional iOS and Android ways of doing things, right? In terms of your second question, do we improve upon the way you build AR VR apps now versus what's out there? So currently the way people do this is they use something like Three.js, or they'll use, let's say, a game engine like Unity or Unreal. With Three.js, that's like it's a full JavaScript engine that's a scene graph, so it's more lower level. So you got to do a lot of things at a lower level, like setting up a scene, doing different interactions and manipulating models is there's a lot more boilerplate code you need to write to do that. Plus, it's not it's a lot of times people interact with Three.js through WebGL, and WebGL doesn't necessarily support the latest in hardware like OpenGL 3S, 3.0, or other GPU features that are coming out. So you don't get the full features that you would otherwise. But the main value we add is that we basically build a set of components to make it really easy to do complicated things. Like dragging an object in 3D space, you could just set a drag type, drag to world, and you could just drag an object around the real world. So versus in a traditional scene graph engine, you got to write all that kind of code yourself. So we simplify a lot of the complicated, I would say, interactions and model loading and asset loading and other things, memory management. A lot of these, and basically the ray hit testing, a lot of complicated boilerplate code that you would otherwise have to write yourself. For instance, we have something called like VRT portal, where you could create a portal and you could just have a 360 video, a 360 movie inside the portal, and you could go inside it and you could turn around and see the room that you're looking at, and you could walk outside the portal inside of it. And we wrapped a whole component to do that for you.
Oh, that sounds cool as hell.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff we did like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess I have another question then. As someone that's like not a virtual reality developer or a game developer or a developer that's kind of worked on these sorts of applications, like what do people need to keep in mind when they step into this space that may kind of throw them off at first, or is it pretty intuitive?
Yeah, so there's a few things. First is a lot of people need to understand where AR is right now. I think there's not much education of what could be done and what cannot be done in both AR and VR, right? So for instance, in VR, there's a lot of headsets like Daydream, iOS, Android Cardboard, and Samsung Oculus Gear that are not 6 degrees of freedom. In other words, you kind of sit stationary in one place and you point at things in 3D space, but you can't kind of rotate your head around an object or walk and move in the world, right? You can only do that with the high-end headsets. And with AR, right now it's kind of limited to placing objects in the world and doing plane finding. You could do things around that, but as the technology improves, there'll be more feature sets added to ARKit and ARCore. But kind of understanding what you're working with and what is kind of the main challenge, I think, for developers right now. So I think that's the main kind of just understanding the limitations of the platforms is the main challenge. But also that also enables you to be really creative and kind of do pretty amazing things if you know what you're doing.
So when it comes to this planing stuff, and I'm not very experienced in the AR VR world. So like, let's say I want to I'm in my, I pull out my phone, I'm in my bedroom, and like there's a few balloons floating around my dresser, and then I leave and go to my living room and have a few balloons floating around in my living room. Are the limitations like the hardware of the phone? It can't store that entire data set of this is where the balloons should float. Let's render them here, and then let's get the balloons in the living room ready too, right? Or is it the software that's kind of behind right now?
So it's a good question. It's a mix of both. So part of it's what you're talking about is persistent AR. I'm in one room and I go kind of pretty far, and I'm in another room and I drop objects in those two separate rooms, right? And I want to go back between the rooms and see my stuff in that room where I left it at. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of persistent AR, and right now there's limitation on mainly the idea of knowing. While the phone could track you pretty well up to let's say 30 to 50 meters before it starts getting a little bit lost, I'd say. Persistent AR involves kind of you need to anchor yourself in the room, and then when you come back into the room, you need a lot of people, you could use GPS and location, but it's not necessarily accurate enough. But you have to combine that with, let's say, photo matching or a marker, and have something relative to that marker to to persist objects throughout different areas. So it involves kind of some server work and working with what's currently exists in the AR frameworks right now.
Gotcha. So you wouldn't be able to this is imagine like a virtualized like React Native list, right? Like you're only rendering what the screen sees, but it sounds like things are a little different, like in like the AR and VR space, right? Like it doesn't work that same way.
Yeah. So basically, AR works what's called there's something called the visual idometry system, which is what AR Kit and AR Core is built on top of. And that essentially tracks you in two ways. It tracks you using your gyroscope and accelerometer, and it tracks you using the single purpose camera. And then it has a weight between those two values, and somehow through some algorithmic magic figures out where you are relative to where you started. And it could do that pretty well for a certain amount of meters. VR, based on the headsets, so the cardboard headsets and the Gear headsets, the Samsung Gear headsets and the Daydream headsets, you could interact with the world around you, but you can't walk in the world. But the higher end VR headsets you can, because they have tracking that you either install in your room, or Microsoft's coming out with what's called inside out tracking headsets, which is you plug in your headset to the PC and it could track you just from the headset itself using sensors in the headset itself. So so depending on the hardware you're using, you could track to a certain amount, but you really have to know what hardware you want your application to ship on and what requirements you're looking for. Because the industry is pretty fragmented right now, it's important to know what your target is.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense. So it's a complex problem.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the normalization, do you think that like these platforms will continue to kind of go their own ways, or do you think, like I know you're solving that, do you think that like the goal will be to support like everything and just kind of how we can use React to build like web and native stuff, or are there things that you're like, well, like we only do like this type of AR, No,
we plan to support, like I said, as the industry changes, we plan to change with it. And I think there'll be, as people experiment with new input types and new control types, some will win, some will lose. But eventually there'll be standards that will start coalescing across AR and VR, right? And I think we're just gonna sounds funny, but kind of be proactive and reactive, right? Like, something comes down the pipeline, we'll be like, okay, well, this looks interesting, and we should support it, and at the same time try to get ahead of it as well, right?
You're definitely ahead of it. 2 years ago, man, I wasn't even thinking about AR at all.
Right.
I know, much less on React Native. I mean, that's pretty bold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of interesting applications being created. Like we have on our platform, we have a studio down in LA called Chaos Labs, and they created a 360 interactive film that they've done some screenings for. They submitted to Sundance. So it's pretty interesting. We created Figment on AR to kind of just prove out the platform, and we're seeing other people sign up and create new interesting apps too. So it's been an interesting journey to see how, what people are creating and what they're starting to do with the platform.
So I have a question. Like, what if someone wants to get started using this? What are the best resources for them right now?
Yeah, so right now we have like a a quick start guide. If you go to docs.viromedia.com /docs/quick start, you'll see a quick start guide that will takes 10 minutes to walk through. You just read that, you download our testbed app, set up a React Native project, and you get a hello world scene. You can start playing and getting started with it pretty quickly. And our docs are pretty comprehensive, so you could just read those. Also, we have our GitHub repo with a lot of sample projects at github.com/Viro. So we have like a bunch of samples there in AR and VR to show you how to get started and get familiar with the platform and the different components.
And what about pricing and things like that? Like now and then down the road, like how does that all work? Or is it free?
So right now it's, and it will be free. So the core platform will be free to use and distribute your apps with. And down the road, we plan to offer auxiliary services that we plan to charge for. But the core components and the core platform that you see today will always be free.
All right. Well, with that, I think it might be a good time to get to the picks. Peter, do you have any picks?
Yes, I have two. So if you use Expo and have ever wanted to kind of control your deployment environments, I built this tool called EXP Deploy CLI. I haven't announced it besides Twitter, and the Expo team retweeted it. But anyway, what it does is it'll make copies of your EXP configurations and let you add your environment variables. So that way you can deploy, to staging, to production, and soon to whatever environment you'd like. So think of A/B testing, for whatever reason, you can deploy as many versions as you'd like. Some of the features that I've been thinking about lately are rollbacks and releases. A lot of the times in a fast moving environment like the one I'm in right now, we make a lot of different changes to both the client and the server. And it's easy to forget, over the weekend, oh crap, I totally forgot that I've deployed this and that, right? I've been thinking about how nice it would be to have the option to list a bunch of releases, right? So we'll automatically git tag, whatever you're releasing. And then the option to roll back too, if you kind of screwed something up and you're crap, it's just easier to roll back than it is to try to fix it. It gives you that option. We use this at Orchard AI, and that's the segue to my next pick. So shameless plug, the product that I've been working on for, half a year or so now, we're sort of getting ready to release. So it'll be like a open closed beta, right? So we're going to slowly, open the floodgates a little bit and see what people think. If you're interested in beta testing an early product and you love networking, or you have trouble juggling an enormous network and you wish you were better at it, check out orchard.ai and sign up for our beta.
Cool.
Very cool things going on.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Vic, do you have any picks?
Yes, I mentioned before, to get a capability of our platform, there's Figment AR. You could download that app and check it out. It's all built entirely in React Native using Viro. Also, our quick start guide is viromedia.com docs/quickstart. And more importantly, we have a repo of samples called github.com/viromedia.viro. You could watch that and just get an idea of how everything works. To learn more about AR, there's this blog by Super Ventures. And this kind of gives you a good idea of what ARKit is, and essentially what AR Core is and what they offer and what that will enable. I firmly believe that AR is going to be enable the next transformation of computing, and it will start on the mobile devices and go from there. So it's exciting times.
Totally, and you're enabling this development for millions of developers that may not have had an opportunity to get in that. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting. So it's interesting to see what people build.
So I have a couple of picks. My first is a book. I finally finished my last book after about a month and a half. And now I'm on a new book called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. I've been wanting to read this for a while. I'm only about a week into it, but so far I'm really, really enjoying it. And I would go ahead and say it's good enough for me to recommend. It's basically about, the general gist of it, kind of like what it's known for is debunking the follow your passion, cliche. There's a little more to it than that. It actually doesn't just say, it's not like it's telling you to go find a job that you hate. It's not about that at all. I would totally recommend reading it. So far, I've already gotten a lot out of it. My other pick is React Native training. We are doing a few more workshops. We just wrapped up New York. We have announced tickets for Denver, San Francisco, and also New York for 2018. So I think at this point, there still are a few early bird tickets available. We sold out in New York within about a month before we kind of of the actual training day. So if you're looking to get tickets, I would go ahead and try to jump on those kind of early. Also, I want to mention, because I haven't mentioned this in a few weeks, maybe months, we do on-site training for companies. We've worked with companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Visa. We've worked with a lot of startups as well as Fortune 500 companies. So we come in and we do like 2 to 3 days. So if your company is looking to kind of get jump started in a very short amount of time with React Native, go to reactnative.training and check us out. All right, well, that wraps up episode 79 of React Native Radio. Vik, thank you for coming on the show. It was really great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you in the next week. Bye-bye.